Can you hear me now?
I can. What was the problem? This week on Dueling Review, we review Transformers Ghostbusters #1 from IDW Publishing. Ghosts of Cybertron Part 1. After years of civil war, the Autobots fled Cybertron, leaving their home planet in the evil clutches of Megatron and his Decepticons. Years later, and millions of miles away, the Autobots pick up a Cybertronian distress signal from a mysterious planet called Earth. The ghostly signal shouldn't exist, and it'll bring Optimus Prime and his team, including brand new Autobot Ectotron, face to face with, are you ready for it? The Ghostbusters.
Ghostformers.
Ghost Transformers. Yeah, you know, I'll be honest. I enjoyed the Ghostbusters animated series. I guess as a mild fan, I guess is what I would say, of that series when it originally ran. And the only time I watched Transformers was when I was over at my friend Mike's house, because it was GoBots, Transformers, and that one guy that showed you how to draw.
Oh yeah, Commander Mark.
Yeah, Commander Mark. Yeah, that was yeah. Man, I love Commander Mark. People don't know who Commander Mark is. You need to go look that guy up.
Commander Mark was local. I want to say he was out of like a Wichita PBS station.
Really? I thought he was a national syndicated thing.
No, I'm pretty sure Commander Mark was like the Secret City Adventures.
Let's see, Mark Kistler.
The Secret City.
Let's see.
They taught you how to draw. They're like, draw in direction 7.
Fictional mother. Let's see. I'm trying to see. I don't really see where it says. It looks like it says following the production MPT station. Yes. MPT, so wherever that was at. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. That was a good show. But then we'd sit and watch Transformers and Ghostbusters or whatever. So, you know, I know that there are a lot of people who grew up in the 80s like us, who the Transformers and the Ghostbusters, not the real Ghostbusters, but the Ghostbusters were the thing to be all in about. And I know that I follow several people online, Damien Willis on Twitter, who's just, you know, that is his obsession. Anytime that there's a Transformers toy out, he'll buy it. And he'll post pictures of him doing the transforming and all that stuff. But Transformers, never really my jam. Ghostbusters, I thought that they were cool because that's what you got before the second movie came out. And then after the second movie came out, you still got some of that. But you're a bigger Transformers Ghostbusters fan than I am.
I'm definitely a bigger Transformers fan. But more of that is just sometimes you have to immerse yourself in weirdo, you know, psycho stories. And I think the interesting thing about this story is just recently, actually, IDW did Transformers Star Trek.
Yes,
which was a crossover between the 80s Transformers cartoon and the 70s Star Trek cartoon, the actual Filmation thing. And they set it in a continuity that was clearly a crossover between those two continuities and put it all together in Flibberty-Bibberty. And this feels like they're doing that again, not necessarily in a going back to the well too many times kind of thing, but also not in a going back to the well too many times.
Well, and I think the thing is that, especially with crossovers and any kind of crossover that you may have, it's going to attract the people it's going to attract. So the people that may be into Transformers may not have really cared about Transformers Star Trek, but maybe that they're fans of the Ghostbusters, and the Ghostbusters and Transformers fans, that Venn diagram is definitely going to bring in some money. Now, again, going back to in the Discord chat, Marshall says that he watched Commander Mark in Seattle.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
Well, according to what I'm finding, Commander Mark was apparently a PBS station out of Ontario.
There you go.
So it may have actually been nationally syndicated. I stand corrected.
There you go. Even though I watched Transformers very little, I do know that Cybertron and the Decepticons never got themselves blowed up.
Right. This is definitely a different continuity.
Which is going to be interesting because when you think Transformers, you do think Decepticons. You do think
Autobots and Decepticons.
And so this starts out with Gozar the Gazarian showing up on Cybertron after the Autobots have said, you know what, screw you guys, we're leaving.
We're going home.
And then Starscream destroys the entire planet. And then a million years later, the Ghostbusters are hunting ghosts, and the Ectobot, or whatever his name is, Ectotron.
I believe its full name is Ectronomus Diametron.
There you go. shows up to track a mysterious signal, and he becomes the new Ghostbusters car. And then they're like, "Hey, what's going on here?"
Right.
Into first issue. That's basically it, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things here that are important. I mean, this plays not just with Transformers continuity, but Ghostbusters continuity, because this can't be the standard real Ghostbusters cartoon or the live-action Ghostbusters films, because Ectronimus Framinominus is disguising himself as the Ecto-1.
Right.
But this seems to imply that they didn't have an Ecto-1 before he showed up? Or I don't know.
No, they did, because they crashed it.
Oh,
That's
it got
the thing.
destroyed.
Yeah, it got crashed. And so the Ectobot is flying over, and he's like, "Ooh, I will scan this car, and I will disguise myself, and even put a little logo on the side. Therefore, I am Ectobot." And then they come out after fighting some crazy Egyptian octopus ghost, and they're like, "How did our car get out of the giant pothole in the street?" And then that's when they realize that, wait a minute, this is not a ghost, this is a car. Also, they capture a ghost Autobot too.
Starscream's ghost, and that's actually a callback too, because there's a whole episode dedicated to after the Transformers film when Starscream is murdered by Galvatron, where you deal with Starscream's ghost, and it is in fact called Starscream's Ghost, which is a good name for an episode. So
that's cool.
Yeah, I thought so. But the overall take from here is kind of the way I felt after that first episode, or the first issue of Transformers Star Trek, except kind of in the opposite direction. Because I was like, with that, I was like, this is crazy. And for some reason, it's totally working for me. And this one, I'm like, this is crazy. And I'm not entirely sure that it's working for me.
I think the reason why it may be that way is because it felt like for a first issue, you do want to have something happen, right? You do want your two characters to cross over. And I think more importantly, you want something that connects them and makes it scary, so that, or, you know, some kind of a cliffhanger for both of them so that they will work together in the second issue. And this one doesn't, because all it does is, here's the Autobots story. Here is the Ghostbusters story. And then Ecto-1 or Ectobot or Ectodynamic Coronicus shows up.
Ectotron is what his short name is.
You know, he shows up at the end and they're like, huh? And then that's the end. And that, I think, was kind of a little bit of a letdown of a first issue story. I mean, I liked where this, personally, I kind of liked where this was going. I thought it was just zany enough to go, okay, let's play in this imaginary world. Let's play what if. You know, a lot of people love the what if stories, regardless of how they're described or under what banner they're being printed under. And this is definitely that. And I can kind of dig what's happening, but I want to know, the Ghostbusters have already defeated Gozar. Well, technically, the Ghostbusters have defeated Gozar in this timeline, and the Gozarian story for the Decepticons happened a million years ago. So to see where they go next in this story, I think is a little interesting, because it's called The Ghosts of Cybertron or something like that. So I think that is somewhat interesting. And so maybe I'm interested in reading issue number 2. Certainly a lot of our listeners to Dueling Review wanted us to review this, because by overwhelming majority, everyone was like, "Oh, you got to review Transformers Ghostbusters." And for what it is, I think it's okay. I really do. I think that if you are a Transformers fan and a Ghostbusters fan, if you were fans of that stuff growing up as a kid, I think this hits that spot. Now, I do have some other problems. Story-wise, though, I think it hits a nice little spot.
Oh. Well, many Insecticons and Throttlebots knew what it was to be roasted in the belly of the slore that day.
I'm sure.
But, yeah, I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, I agree with you that it doesn't feel like a satisfying chunk of story. But also, I think part of that is the amount of time necessary to set up the really kind of cute sequence on Cybertron. And they did their homework. If you look at that first page, all of the, the alt forms that you see on that first page are based on very briefly seen alt forms from like the first episode of More Than Meets the Eye back in '84. There's references in Gozer's new form. There's references in her Robo Dogs. There's a bit where you see her temple, and her temple actually has quintessons on it. Quintessons, of course, are the creators of the Transformers. Throughout the whole thing, there are lots of cute little moments. There's a bit where, Soundwave is analyzing her alt form, and of course, the representations are basically the cartoon versions from '84 of Megatron and Soundwave and Starscream. But we get to a point where maybe it's just the breakdown of it. Is this a 4 or a 6?
I don't know.
I want to say it's probably a 6 because by the end of this issue, Ectotron is introducing himself to the Ghostbusters, but we really haven't seen, we haven't seen Venkman trying to talk to Ironhide, and we haven't seen, Prime was in maybe 2 panels, 3 panels.
Yeah.
The main point of this, I think, is introducing Ectotron, which I'm not saying there's going to be an Ectotron toy on the stands.
It's already been announced. This was announced. Yeah. This was announced about 4 months ago. There's a story on the Major Spoilers website about it, and they will have this at the San Diego Comic-Con in force. They will, if you are looking for this Transformer, they will have it at the San Diego Comic-Con. It was a big deal. A lot of people freaked out at the time because it was right around the same time, maybe even the same day that they announced this crossover. That they announced, Hasbro announced the toy.
Right. Now, is it going to be the actual 59 Cadillac? Are they going to go, is it going to be correct to Ecto-1, or is it going to be kind of the...
It is Ecto-1 that transforms into a robot.
So it is it's the Miller Meteor.
It is the Ecto-1 as seen in this comic book. Let me give you a link.
Car ambulance thing.
Yes. Yeah. Here, I'm going to send you a link.
All right.
So that you can take a look at this. And I'm going to put this in our Discord chat for people that are listening live. And nice. For those of you that are listening into the podcast, just do a search for Ecto-1 over at majorspoilers.com and you'll find it. Nice. And it even comes with a little Slimer thing.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think it's done in the transforming style of the '84 toys, and not the today you can have some of these Transformers like have 100,000 different steps that you have to do to convert it from one to the other. This one looks like it's 6 steps and that's it. Boom, 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 boom.
It's almost certainly a G1 throwback. All of the really expensive models are. So it's probably going to be, like the Generation 1, the Diaclone robots that we know, which I'm really sort of fine with that. And I really do want that toy. And I really do want to see Ectotron hanging out. And I want to see, Optimus Prime and Venkman wisecracking. And I want to see all of these things. But when you look at the basics of this issue, I feel like sometimes you go out and you say, I really want a big cheeseburger. And you have a medium cheeseburger and you're like, well, that's kind of what I wanted and I'm fine. And, I'm going to suffer for the next 3 days, gastronomically speaking. But it's not exactly what I wanted. And that's kind of what this is. It's good. It's good for what it is. It's got really nice references. It's got the, the deep cuts and the things that I kind of love. It's got references to Vince Clortho. It's got all of the things, and the moment where Starscream chooses the form of the Destructor.
And it's him.
It's him with Megatron's severed head around his neck on a stick.
Starscream, you idiot!
You idiot! Yeah, you can hear Frank Welker screaming at him, and you can see, that robot. I swear, not the robot, the ghost with the tentacles. That's a reference to something.
Oh, I'm sure it's a real Ghostbusters, a ghost that they have fought in the past. But here's the thing. My big complaint, and this is not the fault of the artist on this book. Because the artist is only following the approved models that they've been given. I really, really hate the new model look for the Ghostbuster characters. They look nothing, absolutely nothing. And when I say absolutely nothing, I mean they look absolutely nothing like the real Ghostbusters from the 80s TV show.
Or even from, they certainly don't look like Bill and Danny.
Right. And I don't remember Harold why. This look or this style that they have for the Ghostbusters character, especially the Dan Aykroyd character, which I, think is the dumbest one of them all. Right. This was something that they redid, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, this is the IDW Ghostbusters.
style. And I just don't like it. I never have liked it. I don't think it looks like anybody. They just look like goofy, dopey, rubbery faced characters. And I just don't care for that. Now, had they gone and put this on model for the 80s cartoon characters, then I'd be like, oh, yeah, I'm fully on board with this. But I really dislike that style that they've done with these characters. And that is I'll be honest, the biggest turnoff and probably the biggest reason why I won't proceed with issue 2. Story wise, I'd be okay. Art wise, no, I'm out.
I actually don't disagree with you. Simply because sometimes it's hard to tell who's meant to be who. Mm-hmm. Because Venkman doesn't necessarily look like Bill, and he doesn't look like the Venkman that we know from the cartoons. But I'm also sort of wondering if that isn't a little CYA from IDW, because at this point, there are 3 Ghostbusters movies and a cartoon that's 25 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Their take on these Ghostbusters is the kind of the incumbent.
Yeah, it's the new one.
During the reign of the 11th Doctor, everything is centered around the 11th Doctor. So I can kind of understand that. I do want to know one thing. This is very important.
Okay.
Why does Ectotron have a Band-Aid across his nose? He looks like Jack Nicholson in Chinatown.
Well, because that's what happened when he was when he decided to call Optimus Prime Opti or whatever that he was saying in the comic. Oh no, don't call him that. You want him to get angry at you and flip out a razor blade and slice your Cybertronian nose? That's my Bumblebee impression.
That's your Bumblebee?
That's my Bumblebee impression.
That is how you talk like Michael Bell? I do not think you remember what Michael Bell sounds like.
It's been over 30 years since I've watched a Transformers cartoon, so maybe.
It's been like 3 weeks for me. I'm pretty sure that I watched an episode of Transformers, since we've moved into this house, so definitely in the month of June.
Yeah. So there you go. That's Transformers Ghostbusters #1, picked by you, our dear listeners. And coming out next week from Boom Studios, we have Buffy the Vampire Slayer #6. Oh, Xander is going full on vamp mode in here. And I think this is, if it's not this one, it was the previous one. Angel made his first appearance, and we've got the big upcoming Hellmouth crossover coming from Boom Studios with Angel and Buffy. So that'll be interesting. Rocko's Modern Afterlife #4 also arrives next week from Boom Studios. Dark Horse Comics has Black Hammer Age of Doom #11, World of Black Hammer Encyclopedia one-shot. Don't forget, they've got a Black Hammer Justice League series coming up in September. Maybe it's August. I can't remember when the first issue comes. That one may come in August or September.
Whoa, Black Hammer, JLA.
DC Comics next week has Batgirl #36, Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 #3. That's the midpoint of that series. If you want to spend some money, you can buy the DC Gallery Arkham Asylum Batman cowl for a mere $90. Or maybe you could get Deceased #3 for $4.99. The Dreaming #11, Female Furies #6. That's the final issue there. Justice League #27, Lois Lane #1. Greg Rucka on that one, Matthew.
I do want to read Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen.
We have a sneak peek of the first issue that arrives next week up on majorspoilers.com. And oh man, just reading the words and seeing some of the art styles just takes me back to Legends of the Dark Knight and Gotham Central and all that other stuff. And knowing that this is Lois being an investigator and a detective. Oh, cannot wait for this 12-issue maxi series to kick off next week. Dynamite Entertainment has Charlie's Angels versus Bionic Woman #1, Obey Me #4, and Red Sonja #6 coming out next week.
Obey Me, the 44th president?
What's that?
Obey Me, the 44th president?
Yes, that's Obey Me #4.
Oh, okay.
IDW Publishing next week has Sonic the Hedgehog #18, Star Trek Year 5 #3, Star Wars Adventures 23, and TMNT Ongoing #95, as well as Transformers #8. Image Comics has Analog #6, Crowded #7, Gasolina, the trade paperback volume 3 arrives for $17. Sea of Stars #1, Space Bandits #1, not to be confused with Ice Pirates, which is, don't ever watch that movie. Back in the 80s, since we're in the 80s kick, back in the 80s, that was a good, funny movie. Today you watch it and it's just like, oh my God, I cannot believe that they made this movie. Walking Dead 193 also arrives next week. Marvel Comics has Age of X-Man, Prisoner X #5, the final issue there, Arrow number 1, AERO, not arrow like in, shoot the arrow.
Right. That's the new, I want to say Filipino Marvel hero, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, she's pretty awesome.
Cool. Dead Man Logan number 9. Fantastic Four Prodigal Son SUN number 1. Immortal Hulk number 20. I think I'm going to grab all those 20 issues and read them next week. More on that in just a moment.
Should.
I hear nothing ever since you started writing the reviews on that. I'm like, man, I got to read this. And I keep putting it off. But I think next week I'm going to try to blow through all 20 of these issues. Savage Avengers number 3, Star Warps Soldier Supreme Annual number 1. That's a $4.99 book. Star Wars Age of the Republic Finn number 1. Thanos number 2. That's a second printing there. True Believers Absolute Carnage USA number 1. Only $1. And True Believers Absolute Carnage She-Venom number 1. And we're going to wrap this up in the Marvel category with Uncanny X-Men number 21. In all the rest category, we have Betty and Veronica Friends Forever Back to Storybook Land number 1, $3 there. Crossed Special 2014 Pool Party. I don't even know. $7.99 for that one. Dragon Blood number 3, the penultimate issue. Helena number 1. That is a $9 book. Ooh.
Wow.
Jungle Fantasy Ivory number 5. $10 book there.
Gonna get down.
$10 book there, and that is for the nude and naughty covers. The regular ones are only $8.99.
Oh.
Yeah. Looker number 0, $20 there for that book. And that's the Bikini Bee one. If you want the nude one, it's $30. If you want the bikini topless one, that's $30 for a comic. A comic, ladies and gentlemen. A comic. Let's see, what else do we have? Simpsons Comics Colossal Compendium Trade Paperback Volume 7, $19 there. Spencer and Locke 2, number 4, the final issue of that one, just ahead of the September release of, August release of Going to the Chapel. I think we're going to have him on the Wayne's Comics podcast here in a couple of weeks to talk about that. Test number 1, Threshold Allure number 1, Uber Invasion. That's not I don't think that's the car company. Invasion.
No, that's the one. It's actually Kieran Gillen doing Supers from the 40s.
Oh, okay. That's a $20 book.
Yeah, Uber is.
That's not some kind of like German. Oh, okay. All right.
From WW2.
All right. Zombie Tramp Ongoing number 61, $5 book there. That's just a little sampling of the comics coming out next week. You can find a complete list over at majorspoilers.com. Now, I mentioned I was going to check out the Immortal Hulk series next week because I'm going to have a lot of, not a whole lot of time on my hands, but I'm going to be out of town next week doing some stuff with my son. And so we're not going to be releasing any podcast next week. There may be like one episode of something released next week, but Dueling Review we won't be able to do next week because I'll be in a hotel with crappy Wi-Fi. And apparently the hotel we're staying at, while it's not a La Quinta, it is pretty close. And so there will be crappy Wi-Fi, I'm sure, at that place. So I'll be loading up my iPad with Immortal Hulk and a bunch more from Comixology.com. We'll be back with this show in 2 weeks. So next week, I will post up on our Patreon page this list for you to vote on, and I'll make sure that you all know to get out there and vote on it. But one of the things that we do with Patreon, even though I think we all deserve a little vacation here and there, Matthew, we do try to put out at least 50 shows a year, sometimes 48. But we're pretty regular. We don't take, multi-week breaks in many of our shows, just because I don't think that is, good overall. But sometimes I think we do need to take a break, and we're going to do that next week. But we do have a Patreon page, and that is where you can help keep shows like Dueling Review going.
Yep. And this is the very important bit. You don't have to be a patron of Major Spoilers to vote on what's now going to be the July 10th next week. You're going to be able to vote on what we read for July 10th's Dueling Review. But this is the great part. You can go in, you can put your vote. And if you see something there that you're interested in, absolutely, you can sign up at our Patreon page. You can get additional cool stuff, the stuff that is cool that only the cool kids get, like your bonus tracks, your behind the scenes material. Almost every week, before the Major Spoilers podcast, Stephen hits record while we do our little pre-show. Once it comes back, there's the exclusive flashback podcast that Steve and I do, a fan podcast about the CW series, The Flash, which is going to get intense next year.
Yeah.
And, you can get just a few more people will push us past the GM roundtable, where you will get to pick the brains of the Critical Hit crew, literally decades of gaming and interpersonal experience to become the greatest game master in the world.
Listen, we are hitting our 13th birthday, our 13th anniversary at Major Spoilers next week, July 3rd, which, again, seems like every July I'm out, whether it's a Nerdtacular or whether it's a family thing or whether it's, other things related to. We always are missing our big anniversary date. But we're going to be 13 years old next week. Dueling Review is going to be I want to say 8 years old next week. I would love for us to hit 24 new subscribers on our Patreon page by this time next week. If we did, I would be, oh my gosh, so happy. It would probably push us over that GM Roundtable goal and get us further to bringing shows like the Major Spoilers podcast, maybe even Dueling Review live to Twitch, our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/Major Spoilers. But we can certainly use your help, and we certainly appreciate everyone who is a patron over at patreon.com/Major Spoilers. 24 new signups before July 3rd. I would certainly love it. Matthew would certainly love it, because then he could feed his child. And we could continue to make the world go round and not have it collapse into a deep, 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 dark hole. I just heard that was going to happen if we don't hit the goal. We'll have to see if it's really going to happen or not. I don't know. Anyway, thank you so much for checking out Dueling Review this week, and thank you for being a part of the Major Spoilers experience. And we will be back in 2 weeks. Again, 2 weeks, when you will hear Matthew say,
"Dogs and Ravage living together, total chaos."
This podcast is copyright 2019 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.